On the 20th of April 2009, it was like any other day. It was a Monday morning, and I saw the children off to the bus, and then I took a walk with my dog, as I always did. But on that day, instead of my 45-minute walk, after about 10-15 minutes, I just felt like going back. I don't recall feeling ill or feeling tired. So I went back home, and John was there, and I told him that, I was feeling tired, didn't feel like walking. So I then took a shower, and then after that, everything became quite a bit of a blur.
Her colour was the main thing to note. She was just so pale, so pale. So I was getting more and more concerned as time went by, and it was just a question of monitoring her. I then said to her that I was going to call an ambulance because things really did start to look like they were going downhill. Now, this was at 8:30 in the morning, 8 o'clock, 8:30 in the morning. The ambulance arrived 5 minutes later. It was unbelievably quick. They looked at her. They were very concerned by her because she was out. She was slurring her words. Things weren't going well. I think they thought it might have been a stroke or something like that was happening. They put her in the ambulance and drove off very quickly after that. Anybody who's driven in Hong Kong will know how bad traffic can be, especially at rush hour time. As the ambulance was driving through, the cars just parted. And as I say, that was a very rare thing. So we managed to get to the hospital probably in about 20 minutes. When I got into the receiving room, that she was over in the corner. I then went over to see Suzanne, and she was unconscious. She was completely out. They lined her up with IV drips, and they were putting large amounts of adrenaline and dopamine in to re-stimulate the heart. And the heart just wasn't responding. And once they had got the heart going, when they tried to reduce the amounts of these drugs going in, the heart would stop, and then they would have to restart the whole CPR process all over again. And so I decided to call home to Singapore, as it were. I called Alan and told him the bad news, what had gone on. I didn't really know the full extent of what had happened up to then, what was the situation that Suzanne was in, but I knew it was serious.
I received a call from my brother-in-law, John, telling me that my sister Suzanne had collapsed in Hong Kong, and she was in ICU, and the condition was very serious. Shortly after I arrived in hospital, we met the doctor in charge of the ICU. She basically said that my sister Suzanne had brainstem death. Now, this is a medical term used that when you are actually on a machine, the machine is actually keeping you alive. Because if you switch off the machine, you cannot breathe your own, everything is actually not working anymore. Then my brother-in-law, of course, asked the doctor in charge, is there anybody who actually came back from this? And she said no. I asked him to think about it, prepare your hearts, that things will not actually improve. So I was up that night praying for my sister, but there was no change in her situation. In fact, the situation didn't get better, but actually got worse the next day. I remember on Tuesday evening, when I went to see my sister again, her color was bad. She didn't look alive, she looked dead. She not only looked dead, but she showed a smell of death over her. I was praying that evening, and I asked God to give me a word about what's going to happen to my sister Suzanne. I asked him, will my sister come back alive? I asked him, yes. That had a lot of peace of it. So to me, that was a yes, that she would actually come back alive. So actually that gave me hope and gave me heart.
So Alan told me that God had spoken to him and told him that Suzanne would make a full recovery. Now understand my situation there. I was a nominal Christian, and here was God talking to my brother-in-law about my wife, who I'd been told was brain dead, and that she would be fine, she would make a full recovery. I didn't know what to make of that.
I saw myself lying on a bed in a living room with pillows all around and a blanket over me. And I was very comfortable, so I just felt that I was asleep and in a dream. But I just had this sensation of not being able to move and not being able to speak, and feeling very thirsty. And then after a while, this man appeared in the dream, and he stood by the side of my bed. And he was not threatening in any way. He was very peaceful, and he spoke to me, but not verbally. And he said to me that if I wanted, he said, you can't move, you can't speak. If you want to move and you want to speak, why don't you just follow me? And I don't know why, but I must believe that it's the prompting of the Holy Spirit, but I just knew that this man was evil. And I just said to him, I'm a child of God. You have no power over me. Leave me alone. And he would fade out. I remember feeling that Jesus was there. And I remember just looking up to the ceiling and praying and singing every single last verse I could remember, which was really nothing much. At that time, I was very much a nominal Christian. I'd always been believed in God because I was born in a Christian family. I grew up as a Christian. I went to Sunday school. So I was taught verses from the Bible. I understood praying, but it really meant nothing to me. God was important in the sense that if I had any issues, any problems, I'd always go running to God and I'd pray for help. But the moment the issues started unraveling and resolving themselves, I'd just forget about God again. So I was really not someone that was very committed or deserving, of this miracle. This man just kept coming into the scene, and he kept saying the same thing. But after the fourth time, he started getting very angry with me, and he said to me, if you don't come, you don't follow me, I'm going to take your daughter. And at that time, I sensed my daughter. Again, I didn't see me, but I sensed her presence next to me, running up and down. And I turned to him and I said, you have no power over us. She's a child of God and I'm a child of God. So you leave us alone and go away. And it was at that moment that I woke up and then I saw John. One thing really struck me is how, as I was lying there praying and reciting all the verses and singing, there was no fear. There was no fear at all. I just knew that everything was going to be okay. I knew that I was going to come back, and I knew that Jesus was there. So I can only, that to me is really as close as me having had the childlike faith that the Bible talks about. In that 1 week, or after that 1 week, I was told by the doctors that my aortic valve, there had been a tear in the valve. At the time of my collapse, the doctors told me that the tear was diagnosed as pretty severe. And when I asked them what they meant, they said that basically you can't survive if that tear is severe. By the time I woke up on the Friday and when they did the test on me on Sunday, that tear was no longer severe. They then diagnosed it as being mild, moderate and mild. So I asked the doctor what that meant, and he said that it just means that, when you are 80, you have to have a heart valve transplant. And I didn't think that was too bad. So that was totally acceptable. And subsequently, when I came back to Singapore, I went for some checkups. And the cardiologist, when he looked at everything, he said everything's fine. And I said to him, what about the tear? And he said, oh, tear? What tear? So he couldn't detect the tear anymore. So I believe that God has completely healed me. I think that God not only healed me physically, of course, the physical miracle was amazing. I think what is even more remarkable is how he woke me up from a spiritual coma. The spiritual coma that I have had ever since I was a child. And he's just put in my heart this desire to learn about him, to walk with him. And he's really just helped me understand. It was as if I had these scales over my eyes before, and those scales have just fallen off. And it wasn't instantaneous, but I believe that God just I walked with him and he led me through a journey. And it was not until April of the following year that I realized that I really may not have accepted Christ into my life. That I had, maybe I had believed in him, but I had never invited him. So it was in April of 2010 that I decided that I would accept him in my life. And it's just been a journey after that. It's remarkable to me is how God's hand was in everything. If I had not come back from my walk after 10 minutes, I don't know what would have happened. If John had not called the ambulance and the ambulance hadn't come so quickly, and the cars, having partable like the Red Sea, and then with the doctors resuscitating me for 90 minutes instead of the usual half-an-hour protocol, I really don't know where I would be. And I truly believe that God was watching over me on that day, and it was because of that I'm here.